through any activity that happens in Hollywood. The same with the park space. How do we have a fee for each unit that's developed or each square footage that's developed to make sure that it's paying to have open space? We can do some acquisition of parkland. Those are kind of bold steps for Los Angeles. We've never had that in the past. And so we're putting our foot in the water without jumping in head first. They're expensive studies. They're highly challenged to litigation. As you can imagine, they're not too favorable in the development community, but we feel like it's time to start having that discussion. And the one thing we tell people, and we say a lot when we talk to different groups, is it's not that people in Los Angeles don't want development. They want sensible development. They want to see things rehabilitated. They want their neighborhoods to look nice. The difference is they want those to come along with quality of life benefits, so that when something's built, it fits within the surrounding community and it comes with infrastructure. So it's not being placed there and having a burden on the current infrastructure. You notice the power outages we had. Many of those were from old infrastructure. And so when you look at the transformers we utilize, why do we have 1940s transformers and we're just waiting for a heat wave to come out and replace them? There should be a proactive measure to go through our neighborhoods and look at the old infrastructure. It's easy to pick on DWP, but so in the planning department, yeah, you guys do too. In the planning department, we're trying to really elevate that level of discussion through our community plan program. Even if the first plans aren't going to have the solutions, we want to provide those tools in that discussion so people are aware of the different benefits we can do through advanced planning. The difficulty is in our department, we have very limited resources. Out of our 125 planners, many of those are funded through application fees. Whether you're building a kitchen, you need a reduction on your yards in order to fit your kitchen within your side yards, you live in a hillside, for example. That application fee pays for our staffing. We have very few general funded positions, and the ones we've had a reduction from the city council because of the severe budget we're in. So our staffing authority has been cut by 40%. So we're kind of down when the council talked about core services. We're beyond core services. We're having trouble even completing our core services. If you look at our community plan program, it's in order to prepare for the future, you have to invest in the future. And so one of the messages I'm giving the city council members are, we have a small fee right now that we tack onto every application for a general plan maintenance fee. Basically, it's a few $1 million a year that would come into the city to make sure that we can do the advanced planning we need to prepare for Measure R, to prepare for the new rail stations, but also to update our community plans as we go through the city and update the general plan, the transportation element, the housing element, all the mandatory elements by state law are required to update. Unfortunately, we don't really have a huge audience on city council that's asking us or helping us to make sure that we secure that funding. We basically are fighting against police and fire for limited resources, and their arguments are a little more persuasive when it comes to life safety. But we're trying to get that message out there, and hopefully with our plump committee being pretty strong this year, we'll have the opportunity to do that. One of the silver linings is that Measure R, which has gone through the MTA, was approved by the voters. That's going to basically fund 12 different regional connectors, new stations, subway extensions, new bus lines. Comes with a lot of funding for planning activities and for healthy communities. And so we're working with MTA and Martha Wellborn, who's a planner for MTA, to actually help them fund positions in the planning department to prepare our land use for those types of activities. So when the station comes in, if you remember when the Blue Line first came in, it was plopped through Los Angeles. It really didn't mingle with the city. It just was the rail line that was put in with stations that didn't match anywhere. The red line did a little better job of trying to match that, but what we're trying to do is create stations that actually mimic what the neighborhood wants. There's certain areas where density is appropriate around stations, there's other areas where it's not. Just because rail is coming through a neighborhood doesn't mean density should come through that neighborhood. So trying to really artfully look at and not use a spray can, but use a fine-tooth brush to figure out how that rail line is going to interact, where those stations go, and what opportunities exist around them. One thing also that we're working on is the high-speed rail. As that's coming through Los Angeles, we're trying to make sure that it's done thoughtfully. We had an issue downtown where they wanted to go right through the middle of the property where the San Antonio winery was. The people from the state on the high-speed rail authority had no idea what the winery meant to Los Angeles, one of our oldest historic landmarks, and they were willing to just put it right through the middle of the line. And so luckily our local politicians in that area, as well as our planners, stood up and said, it's not going to happen. You're going to reroute your line and figure out how to do it. At the beginning, they also wanted to avoid coming through Union Station. We thought that was ridiculous. So we're requiring them to go through Union Station. They have a new executive director over high-speed rail. We've had a really good relationship with them on trying to influence how they come through Los Angeles. And we've been kind of preaching to them that Los Angeles isn't Santa Fe Springs. We can't use your basic format that you're using all across the state and just plop it in Los Angeles. We really need special consideration from everything from their infrastructure to where they go underground, where they go above ground, and how that interacts with the city, making sure good design, good urban design is taken into consideration. And we're also having discussions with them in terms of where the lines go. There has been a discussion not to even have a line stop in the valley, but other cities like Burbank weren't sure that they wanted one. We made sure we were vocal to say these are huge economic engines. The passengers that ride them have a lot of disposable income. We think it's very important for the economy of Los Angeles to have a station in the city, in the valley, to make sure that when high-speed rail comes through, it's done thoughtfully, but also it brings tourists, it brings travelers to our city that normally wouldn't stop and visit. So we want to make sure that when they get off the train, they're in an attractive environment, that's a clean environment that people want to visit. They can actually spend their dollars in Los Angeles. So we're working on a lot of those issues. Unfortunately, currently they're not funded, so I have one person full-time working on high-speed rail, but we have no funding from MTA, their high-speed rail authority. So one of my jobs has been putting my financial hat on and trying to go out to these organizations and say, we can help you. We're good at doing community outreach. We're good at knowing what the neighborhoods are, what groups to go speak to. It's a new world for them, for so many of them. And trying to educate most of the rail authority on the importance of planning, the importance of land use, and the tie-in between transportation planning and urban planning. And so we've been having a lot of success in talking about how we can integrate the two agencies and have MTA help us with some of the funding. And so the future of the planning department's advanced planning program really is going to follow the Measure R. The good note is currently is anyways, if we look at the plans that we're currently undertaking, they follow those rail lines. And so luckily, we're hoping that we can utilize some of that funding to also do our community plan updates, so we can utilize the station funding for transit plans, but also broaden it to fund our community plan programs. They really are tied into preserving the character of neighborhoods while these rails go through, making sure the areas that are going through are really thought out. In addition, our Co-Cities unit has been very active. We're working on a number of initiatives. Our staff's been out here talking to you, and they're going to continue to come out here and work with you on that. In the future, we're putting together a budget for a sign code unit. The city council we have 14 motions awaiting plum committee to hand over to the different bureaucracies talking about the sign code update. The last point, we worked on a sign update and brought it to council, and the council didn't want to vote on it. So they sent it back to the plum committee. So I learned my lesson, and I basically told the council that if you're going to ask us to do something, you're going to fund it, just like we ask other people if they want an overlay in their neighborhood. We work with the local BID, we work with neighborhood councils to try and secure funding. If the council wants us to study something, they have to find the resources and funding for us to do it, because our core services are really jeopardized. We pull people off a certain project, work on it for 8 months, come up with a really, what we feel is a good ordinance, but politically, it may not be supported many times because of the lobbying effort by some of the business groups, and then we're not able to get that adopted, and we wasted 8 or 9 months of staff resources doing that. So I basically, before we're going to develop that kind of resources, something very controversial, we want to make sure that there's actually a secure funding stream for us to do that, or ask the council, which in our work program they don't want us to work on before we go forward. So we'll see how popular I am after that discussion. But so far it's been pretty good. Some of the things you can look forward to is we are going to continue our advanced planning program, our community plan updates. We started off really ambitious, and we try and start 4 a year and have 12 going on at one time. Unfortunately, we never got one adopted for that program. So I'm rolling that back to a more realistic level. We currently have 2 close to adoption, the Hollywood Community Plan, Granada Hills, Stillmar, and San Pedro. So my goal in this next 2011 is to get all those plans adopted. The EIR work, I told you, got delayed a little bit, but we're back on track. And we're going to devote some additional staff resources just to finishing those plans before we take on any more plans. But in the meantime, there are some things that we're doing in many of your neighborhoods that are really